Your Pittsburgh Steelers cut 3 players already in the 2024 season after the Super Bowl. They have a lot of other tough decisions to be made. We're going to talk about those decisions, the ones they've made, the ones they need to make, and much more on this episode of State of the Steelers. Please hit that like and subscribe button, ring that bell. Without further ado, let's get into it. So the first of the tough decisions that the Pittsburgh Steelers needed to make were cutting 3 players right, the day after the Super Bowl. First one being Presley Harvin. And the reason this was a tough decision for the Pittsburgh Steelers was because, one, he was drafted. Two, he is a Tomlin guy. From all indications, Tomlin really likes this kid. I know that people heard Presley Harvin's being cut. I think the first thing that came out of everybody's mouths or minds were about time, what took so long, things like that. And one thing I want to say is, during, and I know it doesn't count, but during like training camp, preseason, and those type of things early on in the year, in the regular season, he did punt very well. And as the season progressed, it did diminish. Now, I know that happened last year, but I think there was some context for last year. I believe his grandmother and his father passed away relatively close to each other. And he had a lot of things going on off the field that may have affected him. And I think you got to give a player like that the benefit of the doubt. He ended up not finishing last season as the punter. And this year he comes in, he starts off strong, and then it just kind of falls, ends up getting out punted by a guy with only one leg or one hamstring, for the Buffalo Bills in that last playoff game. Now, I know that one of the other reasons why this was a tough decision is because Presley Harvin is an elite placeholder when it comes to field goals. I think that's probably the reason why they didn't want to switch it up midseason, things like that. I'm not sure who they're going to bring in. I know that there's some talks of, amongst fans of the punt god, Matt Ariza. They had some legal issues, but from all indications, I think he was completely exonerated from all those accusations. So he's available. The Steelers releasing Presley Harvin in this manner early on, it's for 2 reasons. One, it's because they're doing him a favor and allowing him to get into free agency early. He can sign with anybody. And 2, maybe it's because they have somebody in mind already and know that this guy isn't going to end up being on the team come training camp or the end of it. Ariza is a guy that, he's not under contract with anybody. He's a free agent, so he can sign right now. He doesn't have to wait until March to do so, just like the other players that the Pittsburgh Steelers have dropped. But just to touch on Harvin's, place holding ability, it was elite. He was able to gather in a lot of the bad snaps. He was able to corral some of the bad snaps that Kuntz had last season, and he never dropped the ball. He didn't fumble. He was very good at his job. And then when you look back at how the Pittsburgh Steelers were winning football games prior to Mason Rudolph getting into the game, every game was won by one score or less. When you're winning in that manner, Boswell in the field goal game is going to be very important. Also, and I understand and I get the punting game is just as important, but getting points on the board and making sure that, you got a clutch holder and kicker when time is dwindling and the game is on the line on that kick. So in my opinion, I think that's kind of why Harvin ended up staying as long as he did. And now the Pittsburgh Steelers can go out there and find the next punter, and hopefully this time they'll get one that can flip the field, help out the defense, help out by putting offenses in, making them go the distance. The next player that ended up getting cut, that was not so much a hard decision. It was Chukwuekorfor, but I was kind of surprised as to when this decision occurred. I was thinking that maybe they could trade Chukwuekorfor. He's been a starter. He's a right tackle. He's done well. He's athletically, he's got it. The intangibles. He's got the strength, the speed, the size that you're looking for in a tackle. I think you probably want somebody a little bit more nastier and aggressive than Chukwuekorfor. But when you can get a 5th round pick for Kinder Green, I don't understand why you're not at least trying to get something. I mean, a 7th round pick would be better than nothing, to be honest with you. It's not like his pay was guaranteed or any of those things. Whoever he could have been traded to at this point, or even after the draft, or around the time of the draft, whoever gets him can reschedule their, his contract, extend him, and do those type of things. So I'm just surprised that they didn't try to go down that avenue and release him as fast as they could. Maybe the Steelers did make some calls, looked around, and nothing ended up happening. Or they just got no interest and felt that he was a guy that was being verbally vocal about, him not wanting to be on the team for the most part. I think he even said something to the effect that had he known this was going to happen to him, he wouldn't have came back to the Pittsburgh Steelers when he was a free agent, that he would have gone elsewhere. So, the Steelers are famous for, wanting volunteers and not hostages. And I can see this being a situation where Chukwuekorfor expressed his want to be released, and Mike Tomlin and the Pittsburgh Steelers did so at the cost of potentially getting some capital back for him. The other player that was released was Mitch Trubisky. Now, it wasn't so much a tough decision that he needed to be released, but I was also, again, surprised at the timing of this release. Right now, the Pittsburgh Steelers only have Kenny Pickett as their starting quarterback for 2024. It's a very similar situation to the Pittsburgh Steelers going into 2021 when the Steelers drafted Kenny Pickett and acquired Mitch Trubisky in the offseason. By all indications, I think that's going to end up being a similar situation here in this offseason. The Steelers are looking out to get somebody in free agency or sign back or re-sign Mason Rudolph, which would also be a guy that's from free agency. I know that there's been some rumors about, potentially trading, for another quarterback. And we'll get into that when we talk about that decision that needs to be made. But the decision to cut Trubisky at this point, I find kind of weird because, well, one, free agency hasn't started. So it's not like they can bring in somebody and sign someone today. They'd have to wait till March, unless it was Mason Rudolph that they were signing. He's still currently on the team until the end of the season, until the end of the calendar year, and free agency starts. The Pittsburgh Steelers can extend him anytime between now and then. So I thought that the Steelers would have acquired their competition for Kenny Pickett prior to releasing Mitch Trubisky. The free agents that are out there in the, for quarterbacks, it's not the best class of quarterbacks for, this isn't the best free agency class for quarterbacks or whatnot. I don't know how I feel about the free agent quarterbacks that are going to be available this offseason. And you're looking at probably a handful, maybe one or two, maybe three of the quarterbacks that are going to be available as possible competition for Kenny Pickett. Now, if those guys end up going somewhere or price themselves out, if there's some sort of bidding war, then you're going to be left with just Kenny Pickett. And I think that's not a good place to put yourself in. So for the Pittsburgh Steelers to release him at this point tells me they already have either somebody in mind, and this thing is almost guaranteed to be either signed or coming back. Now, I don't know if it's going to be Mason Rudolph. I would have assumed that they would have re-signed him before releasing Mitch Trubisky because they had the opportunity to do so. So then it begs to differ. Maybe there's some truth to those reports from Ian Rappaport, Tom Pelissero, and Mike Garafolo. They came out with an article basically stating that the Pittsburgh Steelers are expected to sign Ryan Tannehill. Maybe there's some truth to that, because I don't think that the Pittsburgh Steelers would go out of their way to release the only other quarterback that they have on their roster for this upcoming season without some sort of backup plan. Now, I don't think that the Steelers are going to go out there and get two free agents to make up the room, so to speak. And typically when you go into rookie training camp, you need to have a rookie quarterback to throw the ball. So I can anticipate the Pittsburgh Steelers are probably going to draft the quarterback in this draft. Now, where they get this guy, that's going to be the question. Me personally, I would hope if somebody falls slightly where, they're in striking distance of the Pittsburgh Steelers moving up and getting one, that would be the option, because whether it's Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, Ryan Tannehill, or anybody, I don't see the future there for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I see a bridge quarterback, a stand-in place, so to speak, a fill-in until that future franchise guy is ready to go. And I think you can get that in this draft if the Steelers end up finding themselves in position to do so. But acquiring a Ryan Tannehill or even re-signing Mason Rudolph, I think that gives the Pittsburgh Steelers the opportunity of not having to move up so quick in the draft to get a QB. Maybe perhaps they can get a third or a second round QB and develop this QB over time and have this bridge quarterback be just that, a bridge quarterback for a year, maybe a year and a half. Now, if you're going to be trading up into the top 10 to go pick up a QB, that's probably going to be your QB for the year. And he's going to be your starting quarterback. Don't make the same mistake you made with Kenny Pickett by sitting him for that whole year just to throw him in sometime in the middle of the season. If you think that's going to be the situation with this new quarterback, not saying that ruined Kenny or anything like that. I don't think so. He's a professional. At the end of the day, when it comes to like psyche, confidence and stuff like that, you're playing NFL. This is a man sport. It's football. If you can't handle certain things, you're not going to be, at the top level of your class or in your position. If you can't handle the criticism or things like that, you're not going to have a very long career. So all in all, just the fact that the Steelers released Mitch Trubisky kind of tells me they have an idea of what quarterback they're going to have in mind, whether it's a handshake agreement that pretty much set in stone, just waiting for free agency, which is kind of why I'm thinking it's probably going to be the Tannehill type, just because of the fact that if it was Mason Rudolph, they could have done it already. Like I said, there's nothing stopping the Steelers from signing Mason Rudolph today or tomorrow. So there's another avenue that the Pittsburgh Steelers can go down when it comes to acquiring talent for the quarterback position, and that's been the hot topic, so to speak, and that's going to be acquiring Justin Fields. Chicago Bears are drafting number 1 overall, and there's somewhat of an expectation that they're going to be drafting Caleb Williams out of USC, quarterback. And if the Chicago Bears do that, then there's no need, or there might be some kind of conflict there with Justin Fields. Yeah, he's going into his 4th year. The Bears need to make their decision on whether or not they're going to sign the 5th-year option. Now, that can happen after a trade if the trade happens relatively quick. So that way, the new team who trades for Justin Fields can either extend him and or sign their 5th-year option if they want to take that risk. So for the Chicago Bears to maximize their possible capital to gain for Justin Fields, it'd probably be better for them to get rid of him sooner than later versus waiting past the time where they have to sign the 5th-year option. You leave that option there for the future team that's going to trade for him to be there. And if they can't extend him and they can't put a 5th-year option, let's just say the Bears don't sign for it, then Justin Fields is going to be an unrestricted free agent at the end of that 1 year. And I don't know if anybody's willing to give up to a 2nd and a 5th or high capital for a possibility of a 1-year rental, because there's no guarantee that Justin Fields is going to want to stay. But if the Pittsburgh Steelers go out there and acquire Justin Fields, there's no competition. That's his job. The quarterback competition that was spoken about is another facade, like it was back in 2021 when Mitch Trubisky was acquired. There was no chance that Mason Rudolph was going to get that job. There was no chance that Kenny Pickett was going to get that job. They put it under the umbrella of a competition, but it was no real competition. And the same thing goes with the Pittsburgh Steelers acquire Ryan Tannehill, in my opinion. Any other quarterback, I think that there's probably a real competition there. And what I mean by any other quarterback, I'm talking about any other quarterback that the Steelers can acquire with the budget, so to speak, that they have. Steelers usually aren't a team that kind of pays out quite a bit, especially for newcomers. Very rare. They'll give their own guys the bag before they go out and get somebody else and give them X amount of money. So with how much the Steelers are probably going to be willing to pay, and the free agent quarterbacks that are out there are the ones that are available. Maybe Kirk Cousins is another one that the Steelers could acquire, although I think that one's going to be a pay situation. He's asking for $90 million over 2 years. That's a situation where I say the Steelers are not going to go into it because of the whole pay situation. You can kind of count that guy out. So when it comes to who's available, I think that Ryan Tannehill and Justin Fields are probably the 2 quarterbacks that make it so that there is no real competition there. Now, if the Steelers go out there and get Ryan Tannehill, I anticipate a higher round quarterback taken, maybe top 3 rounds. The Pittsburgh Steelers are going to go out there and get a QB. If it's Justin Fields, I do think they end up drafting a QB, but it's probably south of the 6th round or less, 6th or 7th. I don't see it higher than that. They're going to give Justin Fields that opportunity to be the guy for at least a year or so. And the carousel begins of quarterbacks that the Steelers are going to go through until they find the right one. And who knows, maybe Justin Fields just needs a different place. There is some upside to him. He is younger than Kenny Pickett. When the season starts, he's going to be 25. Kenny Pickett will be 26. Fields is a more mobile quarterback. He can do a lot more damage with his legs. I think he's got the arm strength. He can make any throw you put out at him. The problem with Justin Fields, in my opinion, is something similar that you're having with Kenny Pickett, which is he's not staying in the pocket. He's fleeing pockets. And the other problem is he's putting the ball on the ground. He's got several fumbles, 30 interceptions. He has more turnovers than he's been in games. And that's concerning, especially for a team that is in so many one-possession score games. Turning the ball over that many times or multiple times in a game, or even one time in a game, could be detrimental for this team. It'll be interesting what the Pittsburgh Steelers do with this position. Now, Art Rooney did say that it was less likely that the trade was going to happen, that they were going to go down the trade route. So I doubt that's going to be it. If I had to put money anywhere, I would say Ryan Tannehill first, Mason Rudolph second. And I'll tell you, I'm not excited about either one of them, to be honest with you. I don't think either one are the answer. I would prefer, if it was me personally, I'd prefer Mason Rudolph. He's younger. We've seen what he's been able to do with this team, with these players. He's got that chemistry in a short amount of time. He knows the organization. He knows what the standard is. I can see him being closer to what the Pittsburgh Steelers are looking for in a quarterback this year than Ryan Tannehill or Kenny Pickett. I think there's going to be a push to get him back, but that's a two-way street. He has to want to come back. Now, the next big tough decision that the Pittsburgh Steelers need to make, and that has to do with Cam Hayward. He's going to have a hit of, I think, north of $22 million this year, and that's just insane. I just don't see the Steelers paying him that much this year. Now, there's other ways of limiting that and kicking the can down the line, so to speak, but up to this point, Omar Khan really hasn't been doing that. He's had opportunities to restructure other deals, and unless forced, they really don't. They don't want to push the can down the field or down the line so much. I know that Cam Hayward said that he wouldn't play for a pay cut, that he did. He worked his tail off last season, rehab, came back early from injury, and 100%. You got paid for last season, a very good amount. When it comes to contracts with the NFL, they're paying you for what you're going to do, not for what you did. That's why, like, the running back position, there's not that much money in a second contract, because typically after 5-6 years, typically after 4 years, the running backs position, majority of running backs start to go downhill at that point. So you can pay them for what they did while they were young and moving. And look at Ezekiel Elliott, for instance. He got a second contract based on what he did, not what he was going to do. And he didn't fulfill that. He didn't come close. So I don't know if Cam Hayward's going to get to that level of being paid over $22 million a year this year. I'm not sure he's going to get there. Last season, he was injured majority of the year. That's a part of that battle with Father Time. 17-week schedule, only one bye week, and playing multiple Thursday night games. The Steelers are going to play primetime games. They're one of the most primetime game. They're usually at the top of the list when it comes to who's getting primetime games, and they usually max out the amount of games that they're going to be on primetime each year. So I'm not sure it's a good business decision, to go into this year with Cam Hayward at that amount. I don't see it happening. I see the Steelers either restructuring him or asking him to take a pay cut. I don't know what's going to happen. It'll be interesting, but it's going to be a tough decision. Do the Steelers stay loyal to this player, pay him the amount of money that he's under contract for, and hope that you get the performance that you paid for out of somebody that's up there in age and been dealing with injuries? That's a pretty big risk. Let me know in the comment section what you guys would do with the quarterback position, with Cam Hayward. Who would you pick? Who is your quarterback of choice this offseason? With that being said, I'm out of here, guys. Peace.